What are the latest quarterback rankings looking like, and what do we think about the players that are too far up or too far down? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. We're cleaning up some preseason training camp beginning odds and ends here. We looked at all 32 teams. If you missed that series, we asked three key questions of all of them heading into training camp. Now that camps are opening throughout the league, we're going to focus on the fantasy football rankings and look at the updates you need to know at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. We'll focus on that this week, what they're looking like with the expert consensus. We use half-point PPR, looking at the industry and how it's ranking these guys in the form of the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. It's a good way to look at where people are going around their average draft position, what you should be considering there with the values of players across the board. So today we're going to focus on quarterbacks. We'll get running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends in this week. No surprise they're going down the line for you here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe and follow, including on YouTube. I also have to tell you that this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's dive right into the top tier of quarterbacks. What we'll do is break it down by the guys that are in the top two tiers, and we'll look a little deeper than that. We're going all the way to the QB2s, that's 24 overall, and a little bit beyond to see what we're thinking and where these guys might go in drafts and what their value is in relation to each other. And that's exactly what you're thinking about, is where you want to attack a quarterback. Are you getting the best return on investment, not only versus another quarterback that you could have had later, or a positional player that might have a more better return, however you want to look at it here in the mid rounds. That's what you have to weigh here. And if you're going to go early for a quarterback, make sure it's darn worth it with that opportunity cost. So let's dive right in. The top three, according to Fantasy Pros, the experts, this is a tier to themselves: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts. Now, that makes a lot of sense. Would we go in this order? Mahomes has the highest floor and the highest ceiling of any quarterback in fantasy and reality, and we know that. So Mahomes is the safest pick because, again, he's a good bet to throw for 5,000 yards. He's always going to push for 40-plus combined touchdowns. He's running enough. He's locked in. It didn't matter that he lost Tyreek Hill last year, just put up big monster numbers, trying to mirror his 2018 MVP campaign where he was a fantasy football MVP as well, and he was one of them last year with his big year. People might have been down on him without Tyreek Hill, but it didn't really matter. He made it work with all the receivers, showed a more dynamic element to his game, matured, took the short passes that were there, dominated the red zone. He was fantastic. This Chiefs offense absolutely blew up, arguably the best season they've had with Reed and Mahomes so far. And they won the Super Bowl because of it. So Patrick Mahomes needs to be number two. Now, you could battle Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Hurts is just such a red zone and rushing weapon that's established here that's hard. I mean, Josh Allen is in that same vein. We know that. He's a consistent 700-yard rusher. He's going to get his chances near the goal line as well. But Jalen Hurts, I think, is in a better overall situation with his receivers, and his running ability is better than Josh Allen. And he did finish on average as the QB1 last year, even ahead of Mahomes, but QB2 there overall because he missed the games late in the season. Gardner Minshew had to start there for Philadelphia. So I look at Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. It's your preference here. I would maybe downgrade Josh Allen a little bit because I look at the receivers. And you look at Stephon Diggs, he can dominate, but what we're going to get from Khalil Shakir, we're not sure. Dalton Kincaid, see what we get. Rebound maybe from Gabe Davis. Are they going to diminish the role for Dawson Knox? Are they going to pull back Josh Allen's running just a little bit. A few touchdowns could make the difference between picking him or Hurts, because we know Damian Harris is a pretty good power back that they acquired in free agency from the Patriots. So a few touchdowns, a few less rushing yards for Josh Allen, that's enough to maybe say Hurts. So I'm going to say bump up Hurts behind Mahomes. Mahomes, Hurts should be 1-2. I think they're on a tier themselves. And Allen might actually fall into this next tier of quarterbacks that I'm not so sure he's going to outscore this group. And we'll go to our next quarterback. He's fourth, and this is the guy that's been holding steady at number 4, Lamar Jackson of the Ravens. And really, you look at the upside of the passing game. That's what it comes down to. Lamar Jackson, health and the running, those are key elements, right? If he's healthy and he's running quite a bit, he's going to have a high floor as a fantasy football quarterback. But it's that next gear that got him his MVP results and those big numbers to carry both the Ravens and fantasy football teams. Are they going to have some more downfield passing? There's some optimism over that because they did acquire Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers. So a little bit of the elements that Marquise Hollywood Brown gave them is maybe back here with Rashad Bateman being healthy. You still have Mark Andrews. You have Isaiah Likely at tight end. So there's good reasons to open up the passing game. You have a little bit of uncertainty with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards coming off big injury-riddled seasons in the backfield. So that should open things up for Jackson to maybe throw a little bit more. But he also has them at the same time to play off them in the running game. So definitely look at Lamar Jackson as a potential to really finish as QB1 once again. And maybe that upside might be a little bit more appealing to Josh Allen to some. Allen is just so consistent. He's got the high floor. But I think Hurts has the higher ceiling as well as Jackson. Now, Joe Burrow, I think you draw a line here because you're not necessarily going to get the running that's going to put you over the top, but he can run a little bit to supplement the numbers. He's going to have to do a lot through his arms. So really, can he ever get to that 5,050 mark there that Mahomes had? And that's the bottom line is Burrow, I don't know if he can push past the 40 TD mark, so that might cap him a little bit, but still a very good value here. And everyone's into the running quarterbacks. Definitely Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and Jackson fall into that. And right behind Burrow, Justin Fields is in that group. But you could Joe Burrow again. He's kind of the Mahomes on this tier, right? You get him, you know you'll be pretty safe. You may not have that explosive game, but you'll have the steadiness. I mean, he still can put up 404 in any game, but you won't have necessarily that spike of maybe 100 game that you might get from a Jackson or 100, 200 game, that type of thing that you would get from Fields either. So I think you look at this Burrow situation, I think he's right where he needs to be. I think just the consistency puts him here no lower than QB5, according to the experts. Justin Fields, I think be wary of drafting him too high. I mean, there's a case for all these 5 quarterbacks ahead of Justin Fields, but 6 is a nice spot for him. I wouldn't go any lower. He's just too much of a rushing threat. The cheat code supreme here. There's a potential of a Jalen Hurts-like breakout. The parallels are there, right? They ran heavy with him to get him right. Then they get the receiver here in DJ Moore to expand that. So it all looks right for Justin Fields, but he's right there, I think, in the right spot at number 6. Now, number 7, I'm a little bit not as hot on. This is a guy that maybe is going too high as Justin Herbert. I get he's going to rebound, but I don't think he played well last year, breaking a new offense with Kellen Moore. We'll have to see how the transition goes between Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to the younger receivers. If they look more at Josh Palmer and the rookie in the first round, Quentin Johnston, where do they go there? Are they going to be more run-oriented here? Kellen Moore was like that type of coordinator last year. He adjusted a little bit to the offensive personnel he had with Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, but he could do the same here with Austin Eckler and the stable of versatile Chargers backs behind him. So some to look at. I think the Herbert thing is also hurt by this, maybe the Chargers grinding defensive type team a little bit more than we think here and maybe trying to win games that way. I'm not saying they're going to close up the offense and start being conservative passing, but might be reined in a little bit. Eckler is also a big touchdown scorer as well, so that could cap the scoring material here for Herbert. So the next guy I'm a little bit more up on Herbert for sure. I would bump him. There's an argument that he could go right there behind Jackson in the 5 spot, even at the number 4. So there's a lot of reasons to think Trevor Lawrence can be bumped up and maybe be the QB4 overall this year. Great weapons already. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. He gets now into the mix. Calvin Ridley. So a good red zone threat, a good big play threat for him. He played fantastic down the stretch last season when the Jaguars reeled off all those wins to get in the playoffs and then create that big comeback against the Chargers to get into the divisional playoffs against the Chiefs. So Trevor Lawrence is feeling it. He's a good enough runner with those numbers, and he could easily outrun Burrow. He's definitely going to outrun Herbert, and that's another reason we don't like Herbert as much as Lawrence. So all that said, I mean, this guy's an elite talent. That's why he was number 1 overall in his draft, just like Burrow was following that year. So I do like the talent of Lawrence and Doug Peterson's second year. We know what happened with Carson Wentz. Put up big numbers before he got hurt late in that Super Bowl season, 2017 with the Eagles. So a lot of parallels there for Lawrence to put up mighty numbers. And I think they'll open up the passing game a little bit more, a little less dependent on Travis Etienne on the backfield. The running is going to be more to finish off games for the Jaguars, but I see them as a premier passing team with Lawrence also contributing some to the production on the ground. So there you have it. There's a breakdown of the top 8 quarterbacks on the board. These are the top 2 tiers, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. Maybe you drop Allen into the next tier, separate Mahomes and Hurts, and consider Lawrence with a little bit more upside to push Burrow and Jackson at the top of that next tier. So a lot of things to look at there at fantasy, but that's how I'm assessing it now as we have training camps underway all across the NFL. We told you at the top that this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, and there are a lot of ways to get potential hires. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. And really, it can't be easier. You just put together all the information you need, and you can post your job in minutes there. And really, for a small business, a team, tight-knit, looking for the right candidates, the makeup is very important. And really, you can create that free job post in minutes. Once you do that, you can add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. Really, you want to start this part of the year strong, coming out of summer and going to fall. It's why small business rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, it is time to continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, and we will break down the next group of quarterbacks on the board, starting at number 9. Deshaun Watson, maybe a little bit overrated. This is kind of the so-called dead zone. You have Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, Daniel Jones. Now, I like all these guys. These round up the top 12 here, but there's a few question marks, right? I'm not sure what you're going to necessarily get from these guys. A little bit of wild card. Deshaun Watson coming off that suspended year, then he didn't play the year before, looked rusty, looked shaky. This is a Browns run-heavy offense with Nick Chubb. I'm not sure what you're going to get beyond Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and David Njoku that you're going to feel great about for the numbers. Browns are more defensive-minded, grinding, running-type team. So you look at also the division. The Steelers are tough defensively. Ravens are. Bengals are. I don't know what you're going to get too much for the cap for Deshaun. So I'm not banging the table for Deshaun Watson. Dak Prescott, I don't like the concept of Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy. You have to see what Brandon Cooks can give behind CeeDee Lamb at the stage. And again, they used to have Tony Pollard. They were very effective winning games as a run-heavy team last year. Dak not doing as much running either. So I think there's just better values beyond this. And you look at Tua Tagovailoa, I'm worried about the concussions and durability. That's #1 above all else. I know the numbers were there last year, but how can he keep it up? I mean, we have to see beyond Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Is there a lot there that you're going to see the numbers come through? He doesn't do enough running necessarily. So I'm really worried more so the durability of anything else. Daniel Jones, I look at the Giants receiving core, got Paris Campbell to try to make some upgrades there. They're hoping for bigger things from Isaiah Hodgins and Darren Waller also in the mix at tight end, but I just don't see Daniel Jones maybe running enough to build into that. I think it could take away from that with the passing downfield. I just don't see it being a worthy target here where I'm not going to be too excited about that. So the Deshaun back to Daniel Jones tier here, so to speak, to round out the back end of the QB1s, I'm not going to go after in the top 12. I think there's some really good values beyond that. One of them is Kirk Cousins right behind this group. I mean, he still has Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson to help him put up some numbers in the Kevin O'Connell offense. So there, Geno Smith look at where the source of productions are coming from. Again, you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but now you had Jackson Smith and Jigba. So that all of a sudden says Cousins and Smith, the weapons are a little bit better. You look at Aaron Rodgers, he's a prime candidate to rebound, but he's kind of holding steady. You just don't know exactly what you're going to get. This is a defensive-minded team with the Jets. They can put up some numbers with Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard coming over, and Corey Davis is still in the mix. You also have Breece Hall as a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. But this just tells you, right, you might look at Cousins, Smith, and A-Rod here ahead of some of those guys that are above in that final tier. So I think this is going to be a bit wide open to close things out. I feel pretty confident about Mahomes, Allen Hurts, Jackson, Burrow, Fields, and Lawrence. But Herbert could fall into this second half pretty strongly here, deep into the QB1s, and then you have a lot of values that are beyond the late QB1. So I think there's a drop-off, and that's why I really want to bang the table a lot for Trevor Lawrence, because I think there are a lot of question marks that come after that. Now, after Aaron Rodgers, you look at Jared Goff at number 17. Yeah, I think that's where he should be. This Lions team should be playing from ahead. I know they have an explosive passing game at times, but his splits home road were a little bit concerning. Russell Wilson, I think, is a candidate also to crack the top 12. He has good enough weapons with Jerry Jeudy and the rest of the receivers there at wideout and tight end in Denver to rebound. Anthony Richardson, the cheat code, watch out. I mean, this is pretty high for him at 19, right? Even when we don't know if he's going to win the Colts starting job outright as a rookie over Minshew. So watch out for him rising the charts a little bit, and he's going to have higher upside than that Dak Tua Jones tier. And then Matthew Stafford, he's there. He can be a solid backup. He's going to start. Sean McVay is there. He's got Cooper Kupp. So I really like Stafford as a backup. I'm not interested at all in him as a starting streamer here in 2023. So interesting group here. Again, this is where you'll see the surprises. Someone pop into the top 10, top 12 and really give you that. So I want to be careful. I want to get one of those, I'll say the Magnificent Seven, Mahomes, Hurts. That's how I would put them together, and then look at Allen. Then I'll look at Jackson. I'm going to put Lawrence there next with Burrow and Fields. I want one of those guys as much as possible there if I'm in a one QB league. I don't want to push it into this. Superflex, of course, there are a lot of good options here. You'll be aggressive as possible to do that with the two QB leagues. But one QB, I want one of those top 7 and get to some depth here. Really play the matchups well when needed. And Stafford is a great backup for that. I think he'll come back healthy. Can be a gunslinger. Just see what the matchups are in the week. And if you're not going to get one of those top 7, you can wait and maybe have a platoon situation streaming, maybe 2 guys, even 3 guys to look at here. And we'll talk about some of those guys starting at number 21 there in our final segment as we go deep into the QB2s and then looking at a little bit of the QB3s that we want to keep an eye on, situations that could be welcoming for fantasy football. We'll do that in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, we'll be back looking at the running back rankings tomorrow, the updates you need to know, the news around training camp that may be affecting some of these things here. So subscribe and follow for free wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, it is time to close the show looking at the quarterbacks that lie at 21 and beyond here. And the first one on the list here is Jordan Love, so we're not quite sure what to do with him. Aaron Rodgers, of course, finished well out of the QB1s last year, a similar type offense. We'll see. I think he could grow and get better. He could start being a little bit of a modest performer, but then second half of the season might be a good stash there. Again, if you are not thrilled with that Deshaun, Dak, Tua, Daniel group and you just take one of them based on the value, you might want to stash one of these guys. And I feel the same way about Kenny Pickett. Too many good weapons there overall. When you look at even running back and tight end with Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth, and you look at Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, so many weapons there. Same thing with Jordan Love. Young weapons around him, a little bit of running upside. I think they fall into a similar situation. I just don't think people know exactly what to do with them. But Love and Pickett, I would like to get one of those guys on my team, even if I've got one of those top 7, just to have a little bit of upside, maybe an asset later. Not interested at all in Kyler Murray. I think you can keep dropping him here. I just don't like that situation. Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore being the guys and Kyler Murray not running enough and then being hurt. I would like to avoid Kyler Murray. So really take him off the board if you can. Interesting that Bryce Young comes in at 24, the last QB2 on the board. Yeah, I think he's got some potential here. A little bit worried about the weapons being limited and also run-heavy team potentially with Miles Sanders, with Frank Reich. But, yeah, it's a little bit limiting where when you look at Terrence Marshall or Terrace Marshall Jr., I should say, and then have DJ Chark and Adam Thielen as the veterans behind. A little bit concerning there. Bryce Young is going to have to run to give us a little bit more. So I feel it more with Richardson there because of the running cheat code, if he can win the job. CJ Stroud may be a little bit better. Pock and Young might blend those best, however, for QB2 returns. Now, going beyond that, Brock Purdy is there in the mix. Trey Lance is buried down there. Brock Purdy at number 25 here on the list. So when you look at that, you have Trey Lance 29. So way down there in the rankings. So we're not sure what to do with Purdy and Lance in this 49ers situation. I would avoid it until there's more clarity. Speaking of 49ers, Stroud's that type of offense here. He is number 26 on the board. I might look at him as a backup. Ryan Tannehill, no interest in that low volume Titans passing game, even with DeAndre Hopkins. Again, Will Levis is also on the rankings here, so not going to buy Tannehill Levis or the Purdy Lance situation. Try to avoid that. Sam Howell, he had some good numbers last year. If you look at it late in the season, he does have some good weapons. I might circle him a little bit in deeper leagues, super flex. So there's enough weaponry there. In Washington, Jimmy G just is not a big fantasy producer in general, and now you got concerns about the injury and Brian Hoyer that could be just taking lumps to transition. Speaking of the Patriots, Mac Jones, no interest at all. This is going to be a run-heavy team. Same thing with Desmond Ridder and the Falcons. Baker Mayfield, just a mess there in the rankings. So you just really can't go in any of these directions. But I am intrigued a little bit with Sam Howell, and if he falters a little bit, Jacoby Brissett, just because you have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, a lot of key guys that can make some plays with the Commanders. And a division maybe with some offensive fireworks with the Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles, a little bit different direction there for the NFC East. So there you have it. There's a breakdown of the quarterbacks. We went pretty deep here for sure to give you that here on Locked On Fantasy Football. We went into the top 35 that you can look at the position. So a lot of interest there, but yeah, you know who the usual suspects are to dominate. Try to get one of those 7. If you can't wait a little bit, hedge your bets, get maybe one veteran, get a guy later with some upside, but interesting look at the rankings for sure. And that Love Pickett late picks are very interesting, aren't they? So that's a lot to look at this position. For Locked On Fantasy Football, and our look at the updated quarterback rankings here, the expert consensus for that position. This has been Locked On Fantasy Football. Have a great day, and we'll check you out tomorrow with a look at the running backs.